Hello there, it's me again. My name is Justin, and this is I'm I wouldn't say it's my podcast. I like to think of it as our podcast because there would be no point to doing this unless somebody was listening to it. We had a my friend Eileen. You should tell if you're in the Ruby community, you might know her. She's a big deal, as they say, in the Ruby on Rails world. Yeah, she was over at the house for a few days this week, and we were going, having fun at the Disney parks and all that. And Becky commented to her that I like to listen to my own podcast, and I corrected her that I don't like I don't enjoy listening to myself speak. Although, I'd forgive you for assuming that somebody that tends to be so dominating in conversation and who talks so much might not love the sound of their own voice. I actually, fine. Maybe I do love the sound of my own voice, but only when it's like from the context of my own head, right? Hearing how I sound on like these monitors right now that I'm wearing, or when playing back something is trust me, it's just as cringy for me as it is for I'm sure any of you. No, I listen to the podcast for the same reason that I read my own blog posts. First many times while I'm writing them, but then also immediately as soon as any of them go live, I always click through the link and then just try to spot check any possible issues. So this is a deep cut here, but if you look at the RSS feed, the XML for this here podcast, you'll see that there are a number of versions that the file name is say version, I don't know, 15. There's like the MP3 file that now says 15.3 or 15.4. So I actually cut minor releases with little mix adjustments. Now that doesn't mean that all of those adjustments are necessarily improved. I'm still a total noob when it comes to audio engineering. I like to think that we finally kind of have it dialed in. I liked how version 21 sounded. So if you're new to the show, if you going back to the early stuff, sorry about that. But anyway, yeah, point being, I listen to the podcast. If I spot anything that I need to edit out, for example, I think I did a point release or a minor release of version 21 because I mistakenly bounced in. Yeah. If you've never used a DAW, do they say DAW? I'm not in the industry. A digital audio workstation application like Logic Pro, which is what I use to edit this one. If you've ever used a DAW software, those are so rife with terminology that is designed for audio engineers of the 70s and 80s, I suppose, who worked in real, studios with analog equipment. They don't use the term export, they use the term bounce. Like you bounce a track from something to something else by playing it back, potentially at variable speeds or whatnot to get from one tape to another tape. So when you export your just one of 1,000 little things that when you first get started with modern recording software, it's like a skeuomorphic, right, name as opposed to an image. It's like we still use this name because people in the industry never stopped using it, but it makes even less sense than it made then. So yeah, I bounced the track and I forgot to adjust the mix of my computer loop back, and that's how we play all these fun little sound effects. So they were really loud. So if last week you were like, whoa, this the recommendations jingle knocked me on my socks, my bad. If you'd waited to download the point release that I made, you would have had less of an intense experience maybe. So anyway, I wouldn't do this if it wasn't for you. So this is our podcast. You can participate in your own way by writing into the mailbag. So please do that. And normally I save mailbag mentions to the very, very end. And I know not all of you will make it that far. But if you write to podcast@searles.co, I will do my best to prioritize, make some time for you. At the very least, I'll read it. I usually reply via text. If it's something that would be fun to talk about on the show, I'll talk about it on the show. And then if I talk about it on the show, I'm actually getting to be better at, though I didn't do this last week, I am generally getting better at actually letting you know, hey, this show, I'm going to answer this question. Because I don't want to take anything for granted. I don't want to assume you're hanging out for 3 hours on the prayer that your email is going to get read. It's not like I'm getting thousands of these, right? This is an intimate gathering of just only the absolute coolest of cats here in the Breaking Change community. Well, that was a long preamble to say this is version 22, the 22nd major version of the podcast. The title, This Time's a Breaking Change, is coming to VHS. This is the first VHS release that I've seen since starting, and we'll talk about that later. But first, some life updates. This could have been the version identifier or release name. I had to buy my first shaving, like as in face shaving razor, since college, which was 20 years ago. This week I had the first ever, like, I'd been using all this time, a Mach 3 Gillette razor that had a AAA battery in it, and you press a button and it like vibrates the blades a little bit. And I can only speak for 20-year-old Justin or whatever at the time. It seemed to work better in terms of avoiding me cutting my face all to pieces, because I still had acne then, right? So I'm just trying not to shave off pimples and trying to get the hair to, be shaveable. And I've kept using that handle. It's like super lightweight. It seems to work for me. It's like, it's a great example of a category of a thing that, like, when it works for you, just never think about it again. Like, I've been buying the same type of deodorant for that long as well. And I don't use it most days, but like when I need to go buy deodorant, I don't even think about shopping around, right? So I've been using exactly that razor handle for all this time. It's long been discontinued. There are dozens of people on Reddit who will, talk about buying one used or finding one on eBay or something. And that's, of all, it's not like it's unhygienic. I mean, the blades are replaced, but I don't know. I don't want somebody's used. I don't want to pay a premium for what was an $8 product 20 years ago. So it broke, sadly. So that put me back on the market. It gave out. It gave out during my Japan trip. It must have gotten wet or something. I don't know how it avoided getting wet for all that time, since, shaving is a moisture-laden activity. But this time it was like I went to, shave my face, stroke the handle, as they say, right down the side of my face, and the whole top just kind of like careened off, like all the glue had just denatured. And that was a sign that maybe I should just give up the ghost and buy a real razor. I went shopping. I started with the Panasonic Arc 5. I don't know if that's a good one, but I was talking to ChatGPT about it, and I was being lazy, and I said, give me the top 3. And then I looked at little video reviews of the top 3, and apparently electric razors, which I had not attempted to use since, I don't know, some shitty Philips or Norelco thing, also 20 years ago. I was like, well, has maybe technologies moved along, and it seems to be the sort of thing where it's the exact same little vibrating coil dingus that they've always been, but modern electric razors are just 10 times the size of what they used to be, and they're just way more complicated. So, I tried it out, immediately cut myself, which was a bad sign, and had to, tidy up with a manual blade like 15 times afterwards. So it went really poorly. It managed to cut some skin on the inside of a nostril. It's just so big, the head of this product is like over 2 inches, like wide. So I couldn't just, one does not merely shave their upper lip when the thing that is shaving you is taller than your upper lip. And so some little bit of it got up my nose, and I'm disappointed to report that inside the nostril skin is apparently a sensitive place. You don't want to get cut there. I was thinking about that cut all week, frankly, because it was the most apparent numb, dull pain that just I would be reminded of, when I sniffed too hard. All week until yesterday, when we went out to the pool, and it wasn't particularly hot out. So I spent longer outside than I normally would. And because it wasn't hot, I thought, I'm a manly man. I don't need sunscreen. But because I was out for, 3.5 hours without a shirt on and without having used sunscreen, shame on me. I have like a full back sunburn now. It's more painful than the nose thing. And so now my attention has shifted from the nose thing, which, until remembering I was going to talk about my razor purchase, I'd actually completely forgotten about. So whenever you feel pain in one area, causing new pain in some other area that is more intense is a great way to stop. That's the best painkiller there is. It's a lot like procrastination in that way. So the best way to do something is to find something you want to do even less. The best way to, stop feeling pain in one place is to hurt yourself harder someplace else. That's great life advice. My brother, he bought a Tesla Model Y. He was previously white knuckling it on a 2014 Ford Mustang. That was a very cool car, and it was he tricked it out in all sorts of cool ways, but it was just not super reliable. Not definitely didn't feel super safe. And so he picked up a Tesla Model Y. I went to pick it up with him. It's a certified pre-owned, so it's got a great deal. It had 2,000 miles. It's the whole thing's 6 months old. The guy at the what is now apparently Tesla's first and only used car. It's not a used car. It's not a showroom. It's not a dealership. It's just a place to go pick up online orders for used cars. The fella who works there, we were like, why would somebody, he said a lot of people who were on the waiting list for the Cybertruck leased Model 3s and Ys with the intention of breaking the lease the minute that their Cybertruck order was ready. And he thinks that probably was what it was. And as a result, Jeremy had a car that basically never had been driven, was still in mint condition, and paid half of what sticker would have been because it had all the trimmings, like the full self-driving package included and stuff. So he got an awesome deal. I was happy to sit there with him. I'm not, a Tesla person. I'm not an Elon curious person, although I am, as a tech nerd, I think that we can all appreciate they're doing cool stuff. On a macro scale, there are concerns to be had about building an autonomous system with scant any regulation and kind of flouting NTSB and so forth here and there. But cool experience. It's interesting to see something. The process of picking up the car and how it really did feel like what it would be like if Apple sold cars, right? If they just took what they know about retail and tried to apply it naively to a car, something as complex as a car purchase, or something where ACH has to get involved or cashier's checks have to be involved because they wouldn't accept credit card payments for that amount of money. There are still a lot of paper cuts in that process, and I figured it being Tesla, that would be a little bit smoother by now. But you know, it was cool. You know, Jared's thrilled, and we got to ride in it this weekend. We all went out together, and it's a car, and it's really, really cool. And he's glad to have an electric, and so I'm happy for him. I am still holding out for, well, you know, I wouldn't say holding out. I've got a 2024 Escape Hybrid. It gets great mileage. I would like to snap my fingers and just make exactly that car electric, because that would be neat. But also, it still feels new to me. I barely put any miles on it. I think it's like 15,000 miles so far in, 4 years. So I'm, you know, I don't need a car for another 5-6 years. So I got a feeling like we will all be in a very different place then. I you know, every 4 years when October rolls around, I start measuring the epochs of one's life in terms of how many presidential elections away am I from something. Maybe that perspective provides me a little, like, a modicum of comfort in a moment like this. So that's I don't even have to figure out what my next car is going to be during the next presidency, however that works out in the US. Anyway, while we were at the pickup, only other Tesla note I have. A fella, the previous fella, when I first used the word fella, that was referring to a fella who worked at the Tesla place. This other fella was a customer fella, a former customer. And he was I don't want to be impolite. I don't want to paint with too broad a stroke. But he swerved into a handicap spot right in front of the door. He was in a Model 3, which is a smaller sedan. He struggled to unsqueeze himself out of the vehicle because he's a big guy. Was wearing a knee-length Donald Trump t-shirt flag thing with Trump in just, you know, whatever the equivalent of 350-point font is vertically along the side of it. Had a hearing aid and some sort of, you know, breathing apparatus on his nose. And he kind of hobbled into the dealership thing. Again, not a dealership, not a showroom, the facility inside where we and half a dozen other customers were already waiting to be served because they were really backed up. And just kind of marches in, interrupts somebody who's talking to the staff, and just immediately demands that he be paid attention to. And his complaint is nonsensical. It's like, hey, I bought this yesterday and it doesn't work and I'm confused. And he went on for a little bit and eventually talked to somebody else. Eventually he was advised to maybe sit down and shut up for a little while other people were served. He didn't like that. He didn't seem to like that at all. But it made me think, you know, this current political moment we're in, where Elon has thrown his support behind Trump, even if, you know, he was able to convince Donald Trump and the Republicans that, you know, when you search for EVs now, like can EVs or do, you know, you ask questions about electric vehicles, the Google instant search results will very often surface questions that are kind of born out of either conspiracies or just nonsense that Trump has said on the stump. So, for example, like, can EVs get wet is a very, very significant concern among people who live in red state America or you know, consume that media ecosystem. So, like, it's the alignment of the fans of Elon's little trio of companies, which are kind of like, you know, techno libertarian, mostly dudes, is one thing. And then the kind of like diehard Trump supporter is another. And one would think that you'd be expanding your base by reaching this fella who came in. But it was useful to me in a moment, first for being like, well, obviously, you know, they're probably not going to convince a whole bunch of people to drop everything and buy EVs tomorrow, but this guy literally looks like he rolled out of a rally, saw a booth that was like a Tesla booth, and decided then on the spot, hey, I'm going to go buy a Tesla. And I'm not going to necessarily understand why when I stick like a gasoline, unleaded gas thing into the porthole, it doesn't do anything. Literally didn't know what he was buying. When I see that, I think, sure, EVs have come a long way and Tesla's way ahead of everyone else, but I don't think we're nearly at the point of non-enthusiast, non-prosumer buyers of electric vehicles being able to like figure this shit out just as a matter of course. It's going to be an adjustment for everybody. When and if that transition fully occurs. But the starkness of that moment was just some real Florida shit. And so I thought I'd share that with you. I'm still thinking about him. I hope he's okay. That's a lie. I don't really care about him. I don't think about him at all, and I don't really, whether he's okay or not is of zero consequence to me personally. It's a big world out there. There's a lot of people to worry about, and I choose not to worry one iota more about him than anyone else. I'm worried more about you. I hope you're doing well. Well, that's all I got to say about that. Other life experiences, this was one of the most consequential weeks since I moved to Florida in 2020. When we bought this house, there was a little itty bitty tree right dead center in the backyard, right behind our pool. We have a swimming pool. And it was not a problem. It was just there. It was like clearly one of those trees the developer kind of just sprinkled in the kind of sort of common area to give some texture to what would otherwise be an empty backyard facing a beautiful Audubon nature sanctuary. But the trees, because they were in an easement beyond a hedge, none of these trees that were all exactly 30 feet apart were cared for particularly, never pruned, never trimmed. And they just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was only 5 feet or so away from the foundation of our pool. And as it got taller, and it reached the point of being as tall as the house, as it got taller, one can imagine the root system's getting deeper and broader. And I'm like, man, this is going to totally get into my pool's business. I'd rather that not happen. But more pressing for somebody who, my favorite way to unwind is to make an alcoholic protein shake. make a shake that's healthy for me and then put some rum on top. And then float around in my pool and read a book. As somebody who likes to do that, unfortunately, with the way that the arc of the sun changes over time, over the course of the year, the sun goes down earlier now that we're here in mid-October. Sun goes down earlier each day, and the angle of attack of the sun shifts just enough so that with each passing year, as this tree gets bigger and bigger and its leaves get more and more unkempt, it blocks almost all sun to the pool, to the point of like you couldn't better position a thing to piss me off, because now I'm in the pool and it's like the pool's cold because it's been shaded for 3 hours or 2 hours if I'm out there at 5. And floating around in a cold pool that is shaded is a lot less fun. So I've been wanting to get rid of this tree that whole time. I thought that this was a free country. I thought that when I moved to Florida, I was in the land of the free. But because the tree bordered on my property, but it borders Reedy Creek Improvement District, which has been renamed the Orange County Tourism because of DeSantis and all this nonsense. Because I have that border, because it's in some sort of was previously an easement that's been vacated back to the owners, because the HOA requires Architectural Review Committee approval for things like removing trees. That's like a lot of layers of complexity to get to the point where Justin gets to call a landscaper and say, out with that tree, please. So the number of emails and the number of phone calls and the number of conversations and confusion and hey, I'll get back to you, followed by several months of not getting back to me happening. Yesterday was the big day. Yesterday, I got the okay from the HOA president. Said, we approved the ARC. You're good to go. And they removed the tree. And Becky's first impression and my brother's first reaction is, wow, that's a really big electric utility pole behind that tree. And it's true that the tree was perfectly masking a pretty large transmission line behind it. But you know what? I'm not here about, like, I don't mind that eyesore one iota because it just casts one straight line of shade. It doesn't have a root system. It doesn't have branches. It doesn't have leaves. Like, I'll take the utility pole. There's probably nothing I can do about that. In fact, I like having electricity. But that tree was doing me no favors. And so now that that tree is gone, like, the whole backyard is super bright. It's clear. I've got a much better view of this nature sanctuary. I finally feel like I just checked off the last box of like the initial set of like bullshit when we moved into the house of like fix this, fix this, fix this. And it was a lot of money. It was a lot of time. But here we are 4 years later. And I'm finally like, yes, that like now I feel moved in. And so that was a big day for me. And I felt silly that it mattered so much to me, but then I stopped feeling silly when I just kind of got random little spurts of joy. And now every time I look outside, I'm like, oh yeah, look, it's bright, sunny. I got a better view. I can use my pool after 2 p.m. All these are very encouraging things. So that was a big one. Only other life thing really going on is we are planning yet another trip to Japan. Always planning another trip. At some point, it would be really fun to either move back or split time there in a more formal cadence. But for now, we're going for a few weeks. This is sort of an opportunity to chill and unwind after the rather harried final stretch of building the Build with Becky module for Becky's strength training business. Again, if you haven't heard or seen my talk about it or checked it out, you can learn a little bit about the app at betterwithbecky.com. And I'm hoping to, I might not get to it this week, but before we go to Japan next month, I'm hoping to be able to put out like a little screencast demo of like what the hell it is and how to use it, at least from the perspective of me as a technologist. Like, here's the parts and pieces and here's the different features that you get when you sign up. Because right now it is a little stark. There's the landing page explaining what you're getting, and then like basically a checkout page after signing up. So you don't get quite the preview. There's some stuff over at Becky's Instagram and at Beckygram that shows a little bit more, but we could do a lot better there. So anyway, now that we're over the big hump, we got that thing launched. It's working wonderfully. Initial feedback's been great. We're gonna get out of Dodge. We're gonna go spend some time in Japan, just chill out. I'm not taking a computer. I am intent on not taking a computer, and I hope to just unwind a little bit. I'm gonna bring my new camera that I was mentioning in the last episode. Take some pictures. I just got some binaural. You know those microphone. So binaural microphones means like you're capturing left and right audio. And when you wear them in an earbud format, it means that the distance between the microphones and the shape of one's ear affects like how the sound hits it, right? So people who are doing like spatial audio recordings for I don't know, not a movie, but whatever. Like they'll play audio or like instruments or something around like a little literal plastic mannequin head that has microphones positioned in both ear holes. So even like the shape of the ear, the contours and so forth of the ear affect the way that the sound waves hit it. What's nice about binaural microphones is that when you're a light traveler like me, I could in theory just walk around, maybe I'm doing like shooting photos or video in some city in Japan or on a train. I could just walk around with those things dangling off my ears as if they were earphones, plugged into my phone and then record effectively spatial audio of whatever I'm hearing. And when I play it back, it will sound exactly like, or quite a lot like, how it sounded when I was experiencing that moment. And so binaural audio is really neat because that soundscape is just very unusual for anyone used to recording audio and then playing that audio back, because mono audio through a normal microphone is kind of, flat. It's not bad, especially when you're listening like to vocals for comprehension of speech, it's superior. But when you're trying to just kind of get the vibe of a place, like walking through a market or hearing the jingles and the hustle and bustle at a train station, I want to walk around, like, take some long walks in Japan, get some pictures and collect some soundscapes. And I don't know if I'd release those necessarily, although, like one of my favorite things to listen to is literally just an album on Apple Music of every single Yamanote station jingle of like the sound the trains make and so forth, and some passive audio. So whether or not I release it publicly, I think it would be cool to have, if this sounds weird, I don't know that having like an audio record of places you've been and moments you've had and things you've experienced is any weirder than taking video or taking photos. Especially when you're a creative person who, works at a computer, spends a lot of time writing, a lot of time coding. If you're just going to be playing music otherwise working in silence, being able to sort of zip mentally back to, right, like the sounds of a place or of a moment that meant something to you, I think it's it's compelling. So I'm going to be trying that out. I did briefly when we were living in Japan in 2019, but microphones like literally came right as COVID was heating up, and I'm not sure that I ever did anything more than a sound check with them. Other thing about the trip that I'm starting to grapple with is foreign tourism, which I've complained about several times before, and I will not reiterate now in terms of just the number of tourists being overwhelming, especially to the main destinations in Japan. But it's driven up prices of hotels and resorts and onsen and all this, which is fair. It's just, that's capitalism at work. But even just here we are, like, say 4 weeks out, all the places I want to go are booked up. And the place that I'm going to be exploring, which is like from Kanazawa down through Nagano, Nagano Prefecture, working my way back down to Kawasaki, that whole stretch right there is not super well served by trains. I mean, there are trains, you can get around, but like it's not a convenient series of routes. You end up in a lot of local trains and something that in theory could take 45 minutes or an hour if there were a direct train route ends up being 5 or 6 and often involves buses. So I had the idea, maybe this is the time where I finally get over my fear, and go to the AAA, get my, pay for the $35 or whatever for an international driver's license, bring that with us to Japan, and then do a point-to-point rental car. So we would check in Kanazawa, pick up a rental car, and then use that for about a week of the trip, so that we can access these harder to reach places and have a little bit more freedom. And then hopefully, and this will bear out over the next few days as I kind of research where we might go and what hotel inventory looks like, hopefully get to places that other tourists really can't access easily via public transit. Foreigners are allowed to rent vehicles in Japan, and there's been a lot of news of Chinese tourists, unfortunately, media bias and all that, renting vehicles and the number of fatal car accidents skyrocketing as a result, because Japanese drivers tend to be extremely safe and the laws are very punitive. But the international driving treaties are relatively forgiving. You have to follow the rules of the road if you're on an international driver's license, but there's the treaty stipulates certain, at least my understanding is, and this is like 5 years old now because it was the last time I needed one, uh, you get kind of treated with kid gloves because of the inconvenience of creating an international incident because somebody was speeding or driving unsafely. So anywho, even the last time we were there, I didn't have to think very hard about like how does one acquire a car, because our friend had a car in the family that wasn't being used. I paid him some nominal amount of money, and then he was a total champ and took care of the registration and the insurance for me. I just had to pay and show up with him and sign a thing or stamp a thing. And then when we left, he just took it off my hands and they gave it to like, a nephew to use as his kind of learner car. So I've never had to go through the process of renting or buying a car in a real sense out there. You drive on the left side. That to some of us listening, that might be new. And that takes a couple days to adjust. All of the signs that could be different are different, and they predate like a lot of international standards around signs. They're good. I mean, they make sense. It's reasonable. These days, you might be familiar with high speed blanking interstates. Like tollways. That's the word. Ways that have tolls on them. Different states have different, little transponders that you buy or rent, and that will auto charge your account as you get on the highway. But even, it's only in the last couple of years that, and probably a kind of COVID innovation where any states have gotten brave enough to do away with the toll booths where you could have a lane where you paid cash. Post 2020, there are areas where it's like, hey, this is like, toll only, no toll booth. You have to have the transponder, or in the case of Florida, they have what's called pay by plate. So if you're out of state and you don't have the thing, they'll look up your license plate and then mail you a bill. In Japan, if you don't have an ETC card, which who the fuck knows what that electronic transfer something card, I don't know. If your car doesn't have an ETC transponder thing and then a cartridge that goes into it, literally like a Famicom disc. It's a silly thing. It's a big old card. You stick it in there, and then that acts as your secure token for driving on highways. And it is, if your car doesn't have one of those, and you try to get on the highway, the first of all, you might just get pulled over because that's, against the rules. But a lot of modern ones will actually not even let you on because they'll have a gate, and the gate will just never lift for you because your ETC card was not recognized. And it really, really limits where you can get around because it's a national system. And so there's ETC gates on tons and tons and tons of roads because driving on the highway is not free and is kind of never free. The plus side of that is they got awesome rest areas. Like the rest stops and service areas are so over the top awesome and clean and well appointed. They're kind of like little shopping malls. They themselves become famous. It's like I was just telling the lady who cuts my hair. She's Japanese and we chat sometimes. There's a service area on the highway between Kyoto and Osaka that is separately famous for one store inside of it that sells chicken wings, covered in white sesame seeds. And everyone, whenever I'm like, hey, I'm driving from here to here, they would always be, oh, remember to get some chicken wings. So it's very, very nice, but it costs money. And the way that it costs money is you got to pay the toll. And the way they pay the toll is you got to have this card. And if you want to get that card, you kind of sort of need to be a permanent legal resident. They make it really, really hard to sign up otherwise. Even when I was there on a visa for a year, it was really difficult to get one of these cards. And the way that I eventually got a card was I paid a friend, $500, and I just borrowed his spare card. And I used it. And I hoped that I was using it less than $500 worth, and then I gave it back. So that's not exactly a durable solution. And my hope is, and my assumption is, that if you rent a car, it's just going to have one of those things equipped, and it'll all work out. So that's what my brain is doing at the moment, is thinking through all of the mechanics of renting a car so that I can get to places where other people aren't. But knowing that also, it's a absolutely zero tolerance. Like, don't have cough syrup and then drive a car in the same calendar day kind of country. So you know, days I drive basically become days I don't drink, and then that's not bad. But I do love drinking in Japan. It also means that like driving in Japan is not hard, but I have my, you know, hackles raised. It's scary driving in another country, and Japanese drivers are very, very good and they follow the rules, and they're very, very polite. Don't get me wrong, but it's there's a tension to it, and I don't know if that's because everything feels precarious when you're there as an immigrant, like I was. I don't know if it was because we had a really cheap K car that didn't have like a backup camera or CarPlay or any sort of safety features, you know. And so that just felt unsafe because the car was kind of like a go-kart with walls. I don't know if it's because we were in Nara Prefecture, and Nara is got the oldest roads really in the country. And so like it's just really, really narrow roads that have like cliffs and no railings, roads that you know, have max clearance of like 6 feet, you know, like underneath other overpasses. I don't know if it was those things particularly, or if it was just driving in Japan generally, but I guess maybe it's time to find out. So anyway, those are some things that are going on with life right now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here with me. And I think it's probably time to move on. All right, it's time for follow-up. If you're new here, that's the section where I follow up on things that I've talked about before. If you haven't noticed, I survived Hurricane Milton. That's great news for everyone involved, especially me. We went up to Savannah, spent a few days there. It was nice. It was way better than being in a hurricane. So if you're looking for any hot Savannah, Georgia reviews, I would say it significantly exceeded my expectations. Those expectations were sheltering in place without electricity and filling up bathtubs to have enough drinking water or to flush toilets. So relative to those rock bottom expectations, it exceeded them. It seemed nice. I don't know. It seemed extremely touristy. It seemed like a place that 15 years ago would have been pretty chill, and that is now, because it is rather small and because people are, spending their money on experiences and not products, is just absolutely overrun with visitors. And you can maybe tell a theme here in that, like, one of my favorite places to be is where other people are not. Yet I simultaneously like to be in the middle of stuff and when things are brand new. So I don't know. Food was pretty good. We ate at a couple of nice places. Hotel was great. But I was ready to get home as soon as I found out that Milton came and went and we didn't even lose power, much less internet. So gas stations were still empty. Like they Florida, like a third of all gas stations across the state sold out of gas. So it was a little bit like, just had to be mindful of filling up before we left. We cut short by one night, so I kind of threw out a few $100s on one extra night of hotel. But some cost fallacy wasn't enough to keep me there. The drive out started on a weird note. There was a garage next to the hotel, and I'd been told that this garage was $20 a day. The hotel didn't charge me for the garage because there wasn't a partnership. They said just take a ticket. I took a ticket, and car was sitting in the garage for 3 days. We drove out, and the gate was up, and the computer was off. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't didn't want to steal what I guess would have been $60 of parking. But there's it's unattended. There's no one there. There's no system. I wasn't in situations like that, right? Like not because I'm an upstanding citizen, but because I know myself well enough to know that I will then, some background process in my brain is going to be thinking about, oh, I might get a letter from the state of Georgia, not extraditing me, but like at least fining me for failure to pay a garage tab. That part of my brain will be thinking about that for, call it the next 20 years. So because I know that about myself, I thought about stopping and going and talking to somebody, but we were leaving around noon, and that meant that if we made good time, we would be arriving in Orlando right around rush hour. So we just kept on barreling along, drove home, listened to a couple podcasts, had a nice conversation. Overall, it was a nice little trip. It was a nice little getaway. It was cool to have the tremendous privilege of not having to be here for the hurricane, and also to live in a home that was literally unaffected by the hurricane. The biggest impact, to be honest, was it forced us to clear out all of the patio furniture, pull that inside. So we wiped it all down. So it's nicer now. And additionally, because we got so much rain, it was almost like we'd power washed the balcony and the patio. So things actually kind of felt a little nicer when we got home. Other big life updates. I've been complaining for years about how the iOS, I think it was 16 initially, introduced like a new lock screen for the iPhone. So your iPhone, has all these cool lock screens it can do. And the one that you should set it to, if you're a human with feelings, is the photo shuffle. And you can set the photo shuffle to people and nature and cities, and you pick out the people. I think I have finally, first of all, I got photo shuffle working on the iPhone finally. It only took several years. Of a to-do that I had like monthly is like try to figure out photo shuffle. And I would twist a different knob each time, and it never worked. But the thing that put me over the edge is that they introduced a new Apple Watch face that also has that same photo shuffle. It's like the same code path, you can tell. It goes to the same thing. It says, hey, pick out people and cities and nature. And I really wanted that watch face. Now I'm going to look at my watch. Oh, look, it's a photo of a city. Look at that. I like that. The solution, I think, was I was an old iPhoto user. So from 2004 through 20, whenever Apple launched the Photos app for Mac, we had an iPhoto library. And it was relatively early on, it was impressively early on, that iPhoto for Mac had face detection support, and you could detect faces, and you could give those faces names. And there was maybe, somebody write in and correct me, there may never have been a proper migration path from iPhoto to Photos that had the names, but I'm willing to bet there was something, because when I looked at the photo library and I looked at all my faces, and the fact that the photo shuffle just didn't show the same people, it showed seemingly everyone that either didn't have a name and everyone that I had met after 2013, 2014. But anyone I knew before then did not show up in the photo shuffle. That was a hint that it might actually be something in like a data layer thing, right? Where there's some SQLite database that's got spiders in it. And I decided to figure out, and I wrote a blog post to this effect on how to properly reset your people and pets. It'll say people on the sidebar. This is something you probably only want to do from a Mac. You open the Photos app, the sidebar will say people, and if you have any animals identified there, it'll say people and pets. And if you remove all, there's not a command to do this. There's not a menu item to do this. You have to actually select all the people and hit delete. And if you do exactly that, it's like a cheat code. It'll say, do you want to reset all of your people? Like the people and pets database, basically, which is exactly what you want to do. So I did that, and it was incredibly slow. That operation itself took hours, and this is on a M2 Ultra Mac Studio. It all of the photos are local on device. It's not like the optimized storage. That took several hours just to hit the button and like stop the spinning beach ball from spinning away. And from there, it was several days after that of just face detection before it showed me any faces. And when it did, it only had a few of each of the faces. And I was careful to only name the dozen or so people I really cared about, and to actively remove and call everyone I did not care about, on the theory that like the photo shuffle would only be able to show maybe 18 faces, because that's what it had been doing previously. Turns out the photo shuffle interface can show a lot of faces, I have since learned. But I had to wait for everything to sync, and only once everything synced, I wish that we had a better past tense for sync. Only once everything had been synced, then was I willing to even open the Photos app on my iPhone. And looking at it on the iPhone, it was clearly now correct-ish. It was mostly in sync with what I was seeing on the Mac. And so that gave me the courage to go to the lock screen, try to create a new lock screen, and set my photo. And it basically worked. It was touch and go there. I had to redo it a couple times to kind of like, fully knock out all the cobwebs from the spiders. But now I've got, Photo Shuffle working everywhere, and that's really great. All it took was I had to delete all association between people and places and stuff that I built over the time. And I had a really good catalog of all these people. And I was the guy who's in the Mac, and I would play the little game while watching TV or whatever of like matching all the additional faces. Of course, that's less necessary now because the AI has gotten a lot better. But one thing that this does, and this kind of sucks, is when anyone from that people and pets database had been associated with a contact from my iCloud contacts, if I search for those, the manually annotated people will still be there, even if there's not a corresponding person in the people and pets album. And so there's clearly metadata associating those contacts and those faces in the data or sidecar data or metadata around that photo in the photo library proper. Probably the photo library database, if I had to guess. But that data no longer exists as part of the people database. So there's like if I start naming those people, and I did this for a couple, it now exists as two people in some SQLite database somewhere, which hasn't caused any problems from a user experience perspective, other than it makes the search results a little bit more confusing, but is clearly going to be the source of more spiders at some point in the future. The other knock-on effect that sucked was several of my friends had commented recently like, oh, your iMessage avatar photo is no longer there. It just says JS again. And I decided to try to fix this yesterday. And so I went into that little pref pane. I'd set it back. It did say that, and I set it back to what it was, which was synced from iCloud. And it's like, picture of my face has been the picture of my face on the internet for a long time. And then a picture of me in Yakushima in front of a tree. It was just kind of fun, visually interesting picture. And I selected that, and it still didn't work. So I went in and I clicked customize, and it literally just popped up with a message saying failed to load asset. And then the settings app crashed. So I thought about this, and I realized that it's called in iOS, it's called a poster. You can set that full screen image and the font for your name. And that's how you appear to your contacts when you call them before they accept or inevitably decline your message. And I realized that by fixing this bug, I caused I invoked another bug. The new bug that I found is that failure to load asset is clearly the result of it's referencing a photo based on the fact that it's a picture of me, because the way that poster feature works is it surfaces pictures of you. But when I selected that photo from the pictures of quote unquote me was during the previous incarnation of my people album, right? So that people database got scrubbed. So all those IDs disappeared. And when it tried to load that photo with some sort of referential link to the me that existed before I hit reset, it was like, even though the preview of the photo was cached as a thumbnail and I could see it, the phone couldn't find the fucking photo. And the only solution was create a second pair of poster and avatar, and then assign that. And so that worked perfectly well. Couldn't find the same photo, but whatever. Now if you iMessage with me, you get the little face. That's most of what matters. Incidentally, this is now iCloud cruft, because I can now no longer go and delete that first pairing. It's just like a thing in a side scrolly view of poster avatar pairings that you can create for yourself with different moods or whatever. But yeah, it's now undeletable, because every time I go to customize and edit it, it crashes. And so it just lives in iCloud, and that's just how it's going to be forever. Being a modern user of platforms like this, non-open proprietary platforms that don't really care about data integrity, don't really care, don't have an incentive to tidy up this sort of shit, don't expose the file system to you. You're just signing up for you need to learn, and by you, I mean me, need to learn to just sort of get comfortable with some amount of cruft. I would say SaaS products on the web have generally done this, because very often there's things that there's no delete button for, or we don't have any, influence over how the data is stored and organized. And I know that's something that people care a lot about from a privacy perspective, but for me, it's like, this is my device. I want to make that go away. I want to be able to shell into it and run RM and just delete the file, but I can't do that. And so every time I have to scroll past it, is just a paper cut. It's just like it's an insult to my honor, is how that feels. So I'm just happy I got Photo Shuffle to work. I'm just happy I knocked that tree down. I'm going to take the win and not think about it again. You might also subscribe to my newsletter. I've got a newsletter called Circles of Wisdom. I talk about it sometimes. I did a longish post about my decision to not only retire from public speaking, but to explicitly announce it mid-speech, and what went into that decision, and the knock-on effects and the reactions people had. I used an expression in the last part of that post, in that newsletter. I used an expression about birds in the hand versus birds in the bush, and how there's different ways to interpret that phrase. And I had just written a jokey little one-liner like, why do people want birds in their hands to begin with? I walked towards, for a second cup of coffee after having written that silly line. And Becky came up and said, Justin, there's, I think there's, basically, I'm not going to imitate Becky's voice, because she's got a wonderful voice and I'm just this guy. Basically, there's a dead bird on the porch right in front of the door. Like, it's a long porchway. So like, for a bird to get there, it's got to fly in there or crawl a long fucking way, like 7-8 feet, to get dead center in front of the door. Like, it almost looked like a dog carefully picked up a beautiful yellow finch-like bird and deposited it right in front of our door. So she opens that up when she's about to go out for a run, and there's just this beautiful, pristine, undamaged, unblemished bird there. So because we are both tender-hearted individuals in the Searles family, she asked me to take care of it. And so I literally had to pick up a bird and only after having picked it up, then have the thought, okay, now what? So what happened after that's between me and the bird. But I just wanted to point out the cruel irony of me making a flippant comment about birds in my hands, and then within 30 minutes I had a bird in my hand. So all it tells me is I possess an awesome power. So writing is magic, everyone. Other follow-up, I'm acclimating to fancy camera life. I'm not good at it yet. What's that even mean? I think that maybe the best way to measure camera skill, for the purpose of, I just want a point and shoot that is way better, but that doesn't exist. So I've got this mirrorless camera that I'm using as a heavy point and shoot. I think that the definition of good for me is the shot is framed the subject is in focus and the colors and lighting aren't ass. Like if I can nail all of those things, I'll feel pretty good. And I'm right now I'm batting about 500, which, you know, all told, that means I've got some number of pictures worth keeping. It also means I'm going through and deleting a lot of blurry subject photos and stuff that's just sort of out of frame and whatnot. But it's going well. I didn't, like I said, I wanted it to be a point and shoot. But you fall down this slippery slope really quickly, because what I really want by a photo shoot, a point and shoot, is I want a 2-stage shutter. I want to be able to, you know, click the button halfway, focus the thing, and then push all the way. But and this is true not just Sony cameras, but when you're in auto mode, typically, like it's picking where to focus. It's picking completely based on what it thinks you're going to want to focus on. And so I got, you know, I realized pretty quickly I want a little bit more control than is possible with auto mode. What I want is to have a small centered dot, a reticle, so that I could focus on whatever, you know, is in line of sight of that little dot, and then frame the shot, right? So half press, you point at the kind of like the thing in the focus plane that you want, half press, and then compose the shot, frame it, zoom, whatever. And to do that, I had to switch to the P mode. And the P mode, I don't know what any of this shit stands for. It's the little dial at the top that's got cryptic little hieroglyphs like the camera icon and whatnot, and A and then P and S and M. But the P mode, the shutter speed that it was picking was almost always too slow for what I was taking pictures of. And so then I was like, well, I already had to click off all the auto mode. And if I want to change the shutter speed manually, now I got to switch to like S mode. So now I'm in the S mode, and God help me if I got to change the aperture manually, because then I'm full blown M mode. So this is how it starts, people. I have since backtracked back to P mode because I've realized I can at least just temporarily spin the dial and change the shutter speed. And then it snaps back at some point somehow. So that's, camera stuff's going well. I was 1,000% correct in my expectation that if I just have a USB-C power delivery camera, I will use it more because I can plug it in. If I can get the pictures off of it as just like a mass storage device by plugging in the same USB cable that I use to charge my phone to the camera, download all the things, get them into the Photos app right away, I would use it more, and that's true. So that's encouraging. I dabbled in Darkroom. I decided I was not going to pay for Lightroom. I dabbled in Darkroom. It was too fussy. It doesn't have like an idiot button, just like an auto enhance, which is how I always use Lightroom. It's like I just want auto crop and auto enhance. Just throw some AI at it, make it look good. Darkroom doesn't do that. But the Photos app handles RAW. It's faster than anything. It's like, a hardware accelerated, nice application. And it's got an auto button, and it's got, you can crop stuff. So I've actually decided to go third-party appless for my RAW workflow. Weirdly, and this is kind of frustrating, there's no like shortcut hook for any of those edits, right? You can't, in the Shortcuts app, make a shortcut that says select photos, right? Like let the user pick out photos or whatever, and then apply an auto enhance or change the crop or do whatever. Like there's just like from the photo library in particular, there's not a way to do that. You might be able to do that with a third-party app, but that's not what I wanted to do. So frustratingly, the workflow now necessitates me using my Mac, because I'm not going to go through, if I've got 150 pictures, and like just click auto enhance on each one and then swipe, right? So on the Mac, you can do this because Command E is exactly that feature. And so you can just select a whole bunch of stuff and then hit Command E, and then it'll churn for a while, but it'll enhance all the images. That's the kind of thing I have no faith Apple will ever get to making that better, but it definitely seems like a missed opportunity to not have more photo editing capabilities built into Shortcuts for simple batch work. I'm liking camera stuff. I want to do more of it. I've got a friend and listener named Eric. Hi, Eric, if you're listening, who has offered to take me around and teach me his ways. So hopefully we can find some time this week to hit up a theme park and he can help me improve at this so that when I'm in Japan next month, I'm taking better photos. Last time I bought a fancy camera, I got on the next flight to Japan, and that went less well. So, only other, this is, I promise not to talk about snoring anymore, so I'm going to skip the talk about, hey, this is where Justin stands vis-a-vis his marriage, because he snores, because he's like, like a lot of 40-year-old men, just, you start snoring at some point. You don't know why. And then everyone just asks you to get a sleep study or tells you that you have apnea. I have this app that I've talked about called Koala Nap. Koala Nap, you set it on a nightstand. It uses the phone microphone, and the 16 Pro has a nicer microphone, so in theory it works well. And then it has like some machine language model that it compares the microphone sound in real time to, and if it sounds like snoring to it, it'll send a haptic to your watch. So you got to have, the whole watch and phone in bed with you, which I don't normally do. The issue is that maybe it's an iOS 18.1 thing. Maybe it's just that I'm using AirPods to like listen to something on my iPad before I fall asleep. The issue is that the auto handoff between my AirPods and the phone will cause the microphone to also switch to those AirPods whenever the iPhone decides, hey, the iPhone will see like that continuously, even when the phone is locked. I'm in the middle of an audio session because the audio session is recording microphone input. But because the iOS doesn't expose granular, user-facing controls of like what audio device do you want to be using for input and output right now, it just like grabs it. Like as soon as I put away the iPad, it's like, okay, cool, like and transfers that to the phone will transfer the AirPods connection, but they're not in my ears anymore, and that causes some sort of issue. And now Koala Nap crashes, or doesn't crash, but rather ends the audio session abruptly. And that's how I end up with, like, after 30 minutes into the evening, it just stops listening. And because it's not listening, it's not notifying me of snores. And so I would wake up in the morning and be like, oh, look, it says 0 snores. And then Becky's like, oh, you were totally snoring. Like, fuck. So I submitted feedback. I really like it when iOS apps have a send feedback button that just kind of incidentally attaches a zip file of logs that the app generates. And so I didn't even realize it was doing that. I sent that feedback, and then they had, within 24 hours, very impressively, within 24 hours, they had shipped a release all the way through the App Store, and the update was available. So I went and downloaded that, and then I ran it last night, and of course, like, the bug was not fixed, so that was a bummer. But I appreciate their hustle, so I wanted to call them out. That's good apping right there. Love to see it. In fact, I submitted the same feedback again with new logs, and yeah, I'll see what they say. In fact, I got a new email right now. I'm looking at it. Maybe it's from them. Maybe they got news for me. So that's all the follow up that's fit to print, and it's time for everyone's favorite guest star of Break and Change. So let's keep this train rolling. As I hit the button, I literally just fell over backwards onto a chair. I recovered, but that's the kind of pratfall that you'd expect to see in the vaudevillian comedy that is our pun segment. Aaron Patterson, you may know him as Tenderlove. I know him as Aaron Patterson. He writes a pun for us every week, every version. He sends it in invisible ink. And then I grace that ink with my mouse. I'm doing a circular reveal today. I'm just kind of doing like small little brushwork here. And we're going to read the pun. I'm going to read it out loud the first time that I read it to myself. So it's new to me. It's new to you. Don't know what it's going to say yet. And then after I read it, I'm going to sit with myself, think about the decisions that I've made, and rank it alongside the other ones. Aaron says, Did you know the ancient Aztec were really into Halloween? Apparently, they were famous for their corn maze. Did you know the ancient Aztec were really into Halloween? Apparently, they were famous for their corn maze. So I'm not going to read out Aaron's home address and phone number for you to express your feelings about this one. I will be following up with the author because that is Aaron says that when he says a pun, he wants one of two reactions. He either wants people to roll their eyes or to get angry. And this is the first one that the way it landed with me was just like, oh, I am thoroughly bemused. I am borderline angry. The corn maze. Of course, now Aaron is always careful to write me puns that rely on visual reading and spelling to make any kind of fucking sense. Because I don't think he knows what a podcast is. It's spelled M-A-I-Z-E. That is maze, the fancy word for corn, which may or may not be the same maze as maize and blue, which is the yellow gold color of the University of Michigan Wolverines. Even though maize doesn't grow in Michigan and Wolverines don't live there, so go figure that out. All right, so did you know the ancient Aztec were really into Halloween? Apparently they were famous for their corn maze. That's a, classic. That's real good. That's a if this was the Olympics, that's the technical scale or the difficulty scale. That's high, execution's high. I think we got to rate this one high, even though I'm having a moment. Oh boy. I hate to say it. This is near the top. I'm so my brain is going in one direction, my emotions are going the other. All right, so our number one pun to recap currently is from version 6. It says, I'm really glad Americans are finally embracing tap to pay. It was real touch and go there for a while. This is good. Number 2 is breaking change. Sorry, I don't carry cash, which is great because that's from version 1. And it uses the name of the podcast. Number 3 is writing an emulator seems like a lot of work if you just want to game the system. All 3 of these are great puns. Our 4th one comes from version 8. I loved playing AAA games as a kid, but replacing the batteries got real expensive. And that one, on a personal level, I think I like that one the most of all 4 of those. But still, you gotta right now. The only way that the rules are I don't resort the other ones. So if I made a mistake in the past, I gotta live with that mistake for now. I can only wedge in each new pun between 2 existing ranked puns, and if that's what I'm doing. If that's what I'm doing, the connection between Aztec and maze, the fact that, corn mazes are a thing people do at Halloween, or at least at autumnal festivals. I really hate to do this. I think I'm trying to decide, do I want to say it out loud with my mouth? I think this might be the new number 1. I don't say that lightly. Also, this is a big markdown list. If you go to justin.searles.co/puns, I have to update the list in markdown, which means that now there's 21 rows below this that I'm going to update the fucking number for, because I'm not good at Vim. Yeah, I'm going to give it to him. So season 1, Breaking Change, the current number 1 pun is this terrible one. That's it's gonna haunt me for a while, which is I said that because that's also a Halloween joke. All right, let's just sit, and again, we all have probably some regret right now. Let's just take a moment and create some space for anyone who needs it before we move on. All right, well, I could use a palate cleanser. Maybe before we get into the news, I'm looking at it, and I will say that more than most episodes, this is a potpourri of different topics. Maybe it's because it's been a slow news month. Maybe it's because Justin's spending too much time reading political news, which apart from that Trump feller I described earlier at the Tesla place, I try to avoid talking about straight politics here, because I don't want to be deported from my own country. I just haven't seen a whole lot jump off the page that became stuff I had to talk about. But Tesla is back with a news item because they did their RoboCab and RoboVan taxi event where they had all sorts of nonsense like robots that were being used sort of as remote puppets with voice actors pretending that they were AI to entertain guests. That was kind of, stupid. The goal of the event was to say that, hey, we've got these fully autonomous cabs, or we will, and you'll be able to buy a cab and it will charge itself inductively, so you don't need to plug it in. So an individual could, I think they're allowed to buy up to 10 or something on an account, and they just, I presume via an app like Uber, Tesla will mediate some sort of two-sided marketplace between people who own robocabs and people who want to get a ride in them. Also, anyone with a recent Tesla, including, I suppose, my brothers, will be able to rent them out, micro rent them out as cabs. Elon says it's like, 2026, maybe 2027, which means 2030 never. At least not as currently described, based on how shit he is at predicting. All the numbers out of his mouth are just nonsense, and that's well established. But, the event was interesting, claiming that any new vehicle is going to be under $30,000. That's tough to imagine, especially once we have a few more years of inflation under our belt. But, I think Marcus Brownlee, MKBHD on YouTube. I'll link. I'll go find and link his YouTube summary of the event because it's worth seeing. It's like the visual design language of this, like kind of two-seatery, mini Cybertruck like motif. It's very. You can see. I think you've always been able to see how the Cybertruck was designed with a DeLorean affect. Like definitely it's aping that, hey, stuff, elder millennials and Gen X men like vibe. The Cybercab is even more DeLorean-y in the just stainless steel flat edges. So it looks fine. They had a RoboVan that was like a 15-passenger thing or more, pack a lot of people in there. And that's more of a concept, clearly. I just keep thinking about, no one's talking about how to handle a code white. Code whites happen when people aren't supervised. If you don't know what a code white is, I'm going to let you in on some theme park terminology. So during COVID, when people were being separated, parties were being separated for social distancing's sake. This is could be an urban legend. I heard from a person who heard from a person who heard from a person. You didn't hear it from me. All right. There are attractions where you basically are normally, you're in private. There's not staff around for an extended period of time. but you do have the accountability of other humans from other parties that are with you. One such attraction is there's a Hogwarts Express at Universal Studios Orlando, Florida, and at Universal Studios Islands of Adventure. In fact, that attraction connects the two parks via the back of the park. So both the Harry Potter lands to try to drive traffic throughout to spread it throughout the parks. Each Harry Potter land is very popular, so it's in the very back. You can, if you have a ticket with access, a more expensive ticket that allows you to access both of the parks, you can board the Hogwarts Express in either London or in Hogsmeade, these fictional places. Obviously, neither of those places is real. You might have to stand in line for, I've seen it as long as like 2.5 hours, to have the privilege to ride a rope car that's styled to look just like like you're inside of the train from the kids' movies. I know that's offensive to some people that I just called them kids' movies, but so you get into the car, and the door is shut, right? And then it's like there's a projection mapped like a fake window, and there's other effects. It's a cool little experience. If you ever go to Universal Studios, I strongly recommend you do both those Harry Potter worlds as well as the Hogwarts Express. During the beginning of COVID, after the parks reopened, they would let each party, if you had 2 people, 4 people, 6 people, have their own car. They wouldn't put you with randos. And what I heard was that this quickly led to problems of, I assume, parties of 2, but they could have been parties of 3. Or 4. I'm not here to judge. But it's a 3.5 to 4 minute long thing, so too many people and this would become complicated. People would go in, and in the privacy of their own fake little train car, they would fuck. They'd get right down to fornicating. Theme parks, long day, you're sweaty. It's disgusting generally. You're surrounded with other people. Tempers run hot. You've just wasted a bunch of money, and that of course puts everyone in the mood to just have some afternoon delight, I guess. So yeah, people would have sex, and when that happened, and when it happened in a way that was conspicuous enough that they have cameras now and they have signs that stand out saying, "Yo, you will be ejected for fucking around in here." I don't know exactly the language. So I don't know if they have had cameras then and didn't have the sign warning that you would get in trouble. Or if the cameras came in response to this. But I remember seeing, and the reason that I got told about this was I was at the park and like the line was super long for the Hogwarts Express. And as I approached, I realized that 2 or 3 of the cabins out of like the 6 of them in that particular train car were closed. I had staff going in and out, and they kind of put some sort of rope in front of them. And that's when the person I was with told me that when that happens, it's called a code white. Because the cleaning protocol is rather intense. And of course, people are invited to never fucking come back to Universal Studios again when they are caught doing this. And I'm sure it's very embarrassing for them. But all that to say, if you have a Tesla Model 3 and you want to make some scratch, maybe you work from home and you want to, during the day while you're just at your desk anyway, you want to let your car drive around town, drive strangers from A to B. You're helping the environment. You're taking cars off the road. It's all electric, so you're burning fewer fossil fuels. You're feeling good about yourself. And then you come home, you wrap up work at the end of the day, you're going to go to the bar. So you turn off the RoboCap feature. And now you are walking outside to your car, and you open the door, right? In your RoboCab and your Model 3 in this case that you lease out as a taxi. And you sit down and you just feel an uneasy stickiness under you, right? That's going to happen to a non-zero number of Tesla owners. It will happen. Like if this ever occur, if this service ever launches, like some number of people are going to experience the bodily fluids of other people. Now I know Waymo's doing this, and I've read an article about people having sex in Waymos. But there's a difference between using a public restroom and then being the next guest to try to use that same public restroom and realizing that whoever was there previously, they done made a mess, right? Versus this is my car that other people have been using all day with my consent. But, I think that people treat their cars like it's their castle, right? Like they feel a sense of safety and familiarity there. And to violate that by having just strangers ride around in it unsupervised or only with, cursory automated camera supervision or whatever. With the kind of supervision that won't be able to warn you before you sit in something sticky. I think that people are going to react poorly. And I think there's going to be a lot of viral articles about this. So this is me planting my flag and saying, I can't wait to make some popcorn after this feature comes out. And we hear the first such story of the RoboCab Code White. Moving right along, because I know that story might have made a few of you uncomfortable if you're, Tesla stockholders or humans. Link over to 404 Media. I haven't mentioned 404 Media. I don't read 404 Media, but I read a lot of things that are regurgitations of things that 404 Media wrote. So they seem like they're pretty good. As people with a website writing articles and reporting news in an increasingly sparse, especially tech news and tech business news environment. A fella named Matt, who is the co-founder of WordPress, CEO, owner of Automatic. He spelled automatic wrong. There's 2 T's, and apparently this is a guy who sticks to his guns and doubles down when he fucks up. So that's why it's still called Automatic with 2 T's. And I'm not going to tell you which T is doubled. That's on him. Automatic sells hosted WordPress services. It also loses money on Tumblr and a handful of other projects that don't matter. But they have the WordPress.com hosting service. And so he said some stuff about this thing called WordPress Engine. I don't know what it is. You've probably seen this story in passing, but a story that kind of came and went without me that I wouldn't have otherwise noticed. By 404 Media. The title is Employees Describe an Environment of Paranoia and Fear Inside Automatic, the company that does the WordPress.com, over the ongoing WordPress chaos. Automatic CEO Matt Mullenweg, he wrote a blog post, a really kind of childish blog post attacking David Heinemeier Hansen because DHH was mean to him on Twitter, or at least that's how he perceived it. I think, a lot of people are criticizing this guy right now because he's acting like a man baby. This article says that Blind, which is a service that Blind is kind of like a Glassdoor thing where you can anonymously write about experiences that you have, sort of like a whistleblower thing, as an employee at a company. The way that they make sure that these reports are not erroneous or superfluous or false or whatever is that their form of authentication requires you to actually receive an email from them to log in, to verify that you have an email at that domain. Now, an angle of attack that they probably didn't think very hard about is that they being blind.com or whatever the domain is, The blind app probably didn't think very hard about the way that the domains work is that whoever owns the domain can control what happens to the email. So if you're having employees basically logging into a whistleblowing site and you are paranoid as an owner, you could intercept all those emails or monitor them. And so apparently that's what Matt Mullenweg over at WordPress.com has been doing with all of his employees at Automatic. Okay, I gave away which was the double T. So imagine this. You're an employee, you saw something, you want to share it with the world, ward off other employees, or maybe speak confidentially with other employees about like how to navigate this, how to, find another job, whatever it is. And your shithead of a boss is intercepting these emails, and now he's like individually reaching out to you to be like, hey, so what are you posting about over in Blind there? Like, that would be intimidating. That would be pretty fucked up. And you could, of course, correlate the time of things getting posted there with the time of the login or the email verification one expects. So that's not great. I spoke at one event called Level Up Conference in Saratoga Springs. Automatic did not organize the event, I don't think. The organizers worked for other companies like Mad Glory. But Automatic had a lot of employees there, and they were a heavy sponsor because I think that their office is based nearby. I had a great experience. So full disclosure, I have been in the same room with some of these people, but I don't think the wackadoodle guy at the top. Sorry, wackadoodle's a strong word. Maybe I got a little excited after all the Code White talk. Anyway, Matt Mullenweg, don't post through it. Just stop. Just take some of your huge amount of money and go fucking relax. The title of this version is going to make sense now, based on the next story. Coming to VHS, literally, Alien Romulus. So Alien, either the 5th or 7th Alien film, or 10th if you're counting 9th if you're counting Aliens versus Predators, 11th if you're just counting Predators. No, 13th. There's been a third, that one Predator with the Native American folk. All right, so it's either the 5th or 13th Alien movie. Is coming to VHS. 20th Century is literally printing VHS tapes. They claim will actually work. They've got new poster art. It looks fucking rad. I don't own a VHS anymore, but I think it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it's a brilliant marketing gag for a movie that was probably pretty mediocre and didn't do very well at the box office. So kudos to them. Two, it is an interesting moment to reflect on the fact that vinyl is now significantly more popular than compact discs. And only to note that there's something in the analog to digital spectrum where vinyl discs have retained this sense of realness, authenticity, like nostalgia, sure, quality, all these sorts of positive attributes, but tape never did, right? So you don't see people walking around with audio tapes and thinking, oh, that's the real sound, right? You don't see people feeling that way about VHS. You don't see people feeling that way about Laserdisc. And it does seem to me like, there are completely, from an audio visual nerd perspective, like valid reasons for why that would be. But I think that aspect where like it is kind of top of mind culturally right now, the moment the vinyl is continuing to have, makes this seem simultaneously more sensible and more ridiculous. So anyway, will I buy this? No. Will I think about it? Also no. But I'm glad it exists. So there you go. Alien Romulus coming to VHS, to a store near you. And by a store, I'm surely meaning just a website. Another news item. This is in the Wall Street Journal, which you may know as a reputable journalistic outfit that talks about real things that matter. Had a hot scoop. The Grindr, which it describes as a... let me see if I can load this article. Its description. I'll just read the lead. Artificial intelligence that can date for you is no more than a few years away, especially if you're on the dating app Grindr. No E in Grindr, by the way, if you're looking for a new app to install. Especially if you're on the dating app Grindr, which says it will be releasing an AI, quote, wingman, end quote, or agent, specifically designed for its user base of mostly gay and bisexual men. So here's the thing. AI features make a ton of sense in a ton of different domains. That's why everyone everywhere under the sun is thinking of like what kind of, low-hanging fruit might there be for an LLM or a generative AI to participate in our application. Sometimes we can make things easier for users. We can help them organize and sort through information faster, and so on and so forth. There is no shortage of ideas you might have to expedite, simplify the online dating process. Other apps are already kind of helping people pick out better profile pictures. Surely, if they're not already, probably helping them fake photo profile pictures better. Or giving advice on how to improve one's profile by doing things like lying about one's height and so forth. The reason I'm linking to this one is the idea of having an AI wingman, which is clever branding. And this is not like imminently launching. It's like very like, it's as if they're like, we're deep in the research and development, laboratories of Grindr. They say it's going to be out in the next several years. Like, okay, man. Like, I don't know what the sourcing on this was. One of the things that they're working on, and this is what fascinated me, is wingman to wingman communication. So I am Justin. I am a straight man. I'm not on Grindr, but were I on Grindr and I had an AI wingman, it would know about me, my preferences, enough about my life, and so on. That wingman as an agent could be configured to go and have like relatively instantaneous coffee chats virtually with the wingman of another dude on Grindr. I think the language in the article is fine if there's any deal breakers before two people might talk in real life, as in like actually text each other as humans. One such deal breaker is probably going to be the fact that I'm a straight man, but other deal breakers I'm sure are numerous. So the idea that we would have conversations at the beginning of a relationship that are mediated by AIs talking to AIs is something that has been hand-wavily described, often as a boogeyman, because it's hard to imagine practical cases of it. But this, where, if you see anyone online dating, you see them juggle like an insane amount of direct messages, either in the app or then, of course, they get out of the app and now you're in socials. It's like your whole digital footprint just becomes a goddamn goat rodeo of trying to keep straight who's what and where and names and things. And again, I've not had that experience. I'm just secondhand witnessing it sometimes. This kind of makes sense, right? Like that's the problem. That's why this is unacceptable. It makes sense that you would have a person, a fake person, an AI that like knew you well enough to triage an infinite sea of other people that are probably bad fits for you. And to do that by having two agents talk to each other also kind of makes a certain sense, so that you're getting pre-filtered out, bad pics or pics that might have been based solely on a profile picture and just a, misread or a skim of a profile. So that's interesting. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, people were kind of blown away by the idea that, you know, you might have the beginning of a relationship that was mediated by computers as opposed to like an introduction between somebody you know or somebody you would actually run into in real life. And now that's become quite normal, even if it's pretty universally accepted as being a miserable process. I could totally see in the future that we outsource that grunt work, that painful, you know, job to NVIDIA and their GPUs. So buy NVIDIA stock, maybe hold Grinder would be my unsolicited. Nothing I say here actually constitutes advice. Do I have to say that? I don't know. I don't know laws. Next up, Apple's next 4 vision devices, according to Mark Gurman. This is, I'll link to the subreddit because I don't pay for Bloomberg. So Mark Gurman's last week, his newsletter, which was very long, and he writes in this narrative style that I find very uninteresting. I'd much rather just get bullets. 1. A lower-end vision headset could be released as early as 2025, would cost about $2,000. I have no need for such a headset, and I think the number of people for whom $3,500 is laughably high, but that $2,000 is somehow acceptable, especially when they know they're getting compromised quality, that is literally 0 people. No one is going to fucking buy a worse vision headset for $2,000 when Facebook had to cancel the MetaQuest Pro, which was $1,300. Because no one wants to buy anything but the super best luxury awesomeness. Or they want to spend a few $100, right? And have some fun. So maybe that'll happen. Maybe Apple's just going to, you know, decide that they got to establish these product lines, even if they're going to be very low volume. But like, I struggle to imagine, you know, yes, the Vision Pro has a small market, but that small market is like, you know, some of us would pay $5,000 for the same, or in my case, a better product. Like I would pay $5,000 if it had faster refresh rates and if I could use it as a Steam VR headset, for example. Okay, product number 2, a second generation Vision Pro in 2026. That sounds about right to me. I think that by then there will probably be enough advancements. I'm thinking late 26 though. I don't think Apple's in any hurry to keep iterating on the hardware on this product because they still have a lot of software work to do, and it's going to be a slower burn. I think there will be another one, but if it was 2027, I wouldn't be surprised. I would be disappointed because I want to have the latest and greatest. I would want them to update it every year, but I'm just one man. Third product, smart glasses on par with the Meta Ray-Bans in 2027. Okay, I'm curious what that product would really be, because if it was going to use waveguides, like really like decent technology for showing anything to you on those glasses, we're back up to, even in 2027, we're back up to like $3,000 category product, and I just can't see Apple settling for shit, you know, low quality, unreliable, low contrast, you know, any kind of display again. So yeah, okay. And then number 4, AirPods with cameras in 2027. AirPods with cameras. And people talk about this and they don't know what to make of it. As in, this is not the first time that rumor has been bandied about. I think that post their Apple September event, the iPhone event, where we learned that the camera control button is going to become a visual intelligence button as well. When you press and hold it, it will open up the camera, but not for the purpose of taking photos, for the purpose of understanding the world around you, looking at a poster and like identifying a potential calendar event that you could add. Having AirPods that have cameras, you could already imagine what the keynote would look like, or the demo in the video would look like. It would be like, "Hey Siri, what's that?" Oh shoot, I just said it. "Hey Dingus, what's that?" "Hey Dingus."
Responding to 3 million people calling out "Hey Siri" at the same time.
I don't know exactly what it said, but I think it was joking about that. Uh, okay. Lost. Back on track here. Yes, you could imagine just not having to pull out your phone and being able to ask Dingus for information about the world around you based on what it can see. Like that would be an interesting use case, because I am a huge fan of not pulling out my phone. And one of the ways in which that the Apple Watch has sort of fallen behind in utility, especially in the era of LLMs and me wanting to constantly be scanning menus in Japanese or whatever the case is that my phone has become more important. Whereas the lack of cameras on the watch never made me feel like it was less capable previously. So that's where Gurman says it's going. I have no reason to think otherwise. He knows way more than I do and has actual contacts at Apple that tell him stuff. It all sounds roughly correct. You know, some people are freaking out about Vision Pro. It's a big failure. It's whatever. Like, it was a 10-year project and we're still in year one, for fuck's sake. Like, yep. All right. Like, slugs are going to feel sloggy. It's just like U.S. presidential politics in October. It's like, yeah, people are nervous and anxious and they're ready for this to be done. And no one knows what the future holds. And it's unsettling. So why be surprised by that fact? Next in the news, Apple did a press release on announcement of the iPad Mini 7. It's like the iPad Mini 6, except it's a 7. You know, faster USB port, A17 Pro. So weirdly, Apple's divesting themselves of all of the first generation 3 nanometer chips, because the yields weren't great. It's very expensive. That's why they got both of the new phones onto the second generation 3 nanometer process. That's why they're getting everyone off the M3 probably next week. And yet, the brand new iPad Mini 7 is going to have that first generation 3 nanometer chip in it, from the iPhone 15 Pro. And if you look at it, it looks like just a year's worth of iPhone 15 Pros that had a malfunctioning GPU core, because they're all one fewer GPU core. So they've turned off a GPU core. So like, one does the math, and like, Apple sells a lot of fucking iPhones. I bet you that over the course of that year, they probably got 4 years worth of iPad Mini CPUs that they can just use. They probably don't need to make any new CPUs. They can probably just use these ones that were in the dustbin otherwise. So this is a reduce, reuse, recycle kind of product, is my guess. And of course, if they somehow run out because the iPad Mini is so successful, they'll just stick an 18 Pro in there or whatever and bump it again. It also says Mini for the first time on the bottom of the back. It says iPad Mini. So if you care about that, supports the new Apple Pencil Pro. That's pretty nice. It fixes the Jelly Scroll issue. That's pretty great. And then for the same $499, you get 128 gigs instead of 64 gigs, which is relevant because Becky uses the iPad Mini 6 that had 64 gigs. And like clockwork, this morning she got a storage out of storage error, which led me to learn all these facts about the iPad Mini 7 because I went and bought one, so that she could double her storage 2 hours later. So there you have it, the iPad Mini 7. I will have a review. No, I won't. We know what it's going to be. It's a boring product, but iPad Minis are great. Don't get me wrong. Okay, next up. Moving on to video games. Diablo 4, which I played earlier this year, and I just kind of bum rushed through the campaign because it was a serviceable game. The buttons, you click the buttons and then your character did stuff and then people died. At no point did I feel like I was having fun. When there was a challenge, I didn't really enjoy it. The story was mediocre. The graphics were uninteresting. The theme, not my favorite. Well, it has an expansion pack called Vessel of Hatred, which is a real mood. and it's even darker and eviler than before. So Blizzard used to make these expansion packs, right? Like, hey, here's a StarCraft, right? The real time strategy game. Well, Brood War was its big expansion, right? Like Warcraft 3, another RTS, had Frozen Throne, and like there was this kind of golden era of expansion packs where you'd buy a game for say $50, and then an expansion pack would come out several years later for $39, and it would basically, because patches weren't commonplace then, it would do a lot to clean up and fix the base game, but also add new content, and also for online multiplayer games to kind of redefine or refine the multiplayer experience. And so like everyone, if you want to continue to play online past a certain point, you'd have to buy the expansion pack. In the current era where, we're on season 5 of Diablo 4. I fell off as soon as I finished the campaign. I was all set, right? But like, it's designed to be a game that some number of whales especially will keep buying garbage in. They'll buy the battle pass equivalent. They'll be in every season. They'll buy a lot of products. To release a traditional expansion pack that has new story content and impacts the game in other ways. Similar, World of Warcraft kept doing that, but it's like you have a captive audience. They're paying a subscription fee because they're like thoroughly addicted. All these other live service games, and Blizzard's found themselves on the wrong side of this calculus several times, like when Activision pushed them to do an Overwatch 2 without thinking very hard about the fact that like it would bifurcate the user base, and then that's a whole other issue. It does. I'm going to be curious to see. The reviews are generally pretty good, by the way, or at least of the reviewers that I read, they seem to like it. Plenty of people think this is bad. I'm not going to play it because I think I've had my fill. But even though I'm cheap, and even though I only played that game because it was on Game Pass and I didn't have to pay money for it, and this expansion pack is not going to be on Game Pass because like typically, like if you're paying for that subscription service, like anything above and beyond, that's on you. So if you want to, if you like a game so much that you'll not only play it on the subscription, but you want the additional content available, then you have to pay for that, right? I genuinely want to see how this performs, because it might be good if a forever game, whether it's like a proper live service game or just a game that, needs to, in order to make the money that has been promised to investors and to the business people, needs to keep running and keep receiving incremental updates, whether or not there is still an appetite for paid, meaningful updates, right? Because there's a certain number of people out there who will just like stick around forever for a slightly more childish looking sword. But that's not me, right? But you got new narrative content, you got new game mechanics, you got new entire environments to explore. Like that'll get, I think, more normal people engaged and giving things a second look, and hopefully increase the longevity of a game. And so I think anything that encourages more like real content to get created for games, as opposed to the sort of like strip mining of dopamine that we typically see in live service games, like it has me rooting for the vessel of hatred. So we'll see how that goes. Another game from another game maker who's had some troubles. Dragon Age Veilguard arrives at the end of the month here, just in 11 days. Dragon Age started years ago with Dragon Age Origins, which was like a proper Dungeons and Dragons kind of turn-based RPG, but in a 3D world. And it was like, I had a lot of fun with it until I didn't, and then I stopped. But I had enough fun that I look back on that fondly. There's been a couple games since then, and I had no fun with those. It slowly morphed into an action RPG, as most role-playing games have, because the role-playing-ification of every single fucking genre where you're playing a shooter and you shoot guys and then you level up even. Like, it's not the what used to mean role-playing game, which was like slower paced and strategic and turn-based, as opposed to needing, twitch reactions and trigger finger, means that like now there is less room for slower paced, more narrative games generally, because everything is kind of an RPG. Well, Dragon Age Veilguard is definitely a third-person action game with like RPG elements, and so that's one knock against it. But I'm old enough to remember that BioWare is one of my favorite game studios. You know, Knights of the Old Republic, one of my favorite games. The original Mass Effect, one of my favorite games. And with their recent outings, you know, the latest Mass Effect was garbage. Andromeda, I did not have a lot of fun. I tried really hard. It was not good. Anthem was another stinker. You know, BioWare's had a rough go of it. You can point to the fact that Electronic Arts bought them, and a lot of things had to go wrong. But it would be nice to see them make another, you know, good narrative experience. You play as like a particular character instead of just building your own, and you're surrounded by potential party members that seem to have interesting stories. And it's hot on the heels of Baldur's Gate 3 last year being a huge hit. So there's definitely the market opportunity for this to be a hit, especially if it's funny and fun and enjoyable. So I'm looking forward to reviews of that. I share that as news because there were a bunch of a few weeks back. I missed this extended preview event where game journalists were able to play for 6-7 hours, and the reviews were just much better the previews were much better than initial trailer suggested, along with the name change and stuff. And so I think that some people think that they're on the right course. So I'll link to one such preview here. But I'm just tipping my hat in hope that I really feel like if this bombs, BioWare is probably going to get shut down, or otherwise cease to exist in the form that it currently does, and continue the trend of Electronic Arts just burying companies that it acquires, like Westwood or Maxis or so forth. All right, well, I think that just about does it for the news. If you have any news that you would like to submit, please email me, podcast@searles.co, and I'll cover it on the program. But now it's time for some recommendations. I don't have any recommendations. It's been a busy couple of weeks. I don't know. Between the hurricane, all the like logistics and the cleanup and everything like that, and then having house guests and so forth, I haven't really been doing anything fun. Still playing the same fucking video game, Star Wars Outlaws, yada yada. Becky and I picked up Strange Planet after putting it on the shelf for 6 months. Strange Planet being the little cute blue aliens that make trite observations about reality by using different languages, or different language for familiar concepts, to make light of our life. It's a comic strip, but also it's an Apple TV 1-season comedy program. I quite like that show. It is very, very cute, and it's heartwarming. And if you haven't tried watching Strange Planet Apple TV Plus, I encourage you to give it a shot. It's a weird concept. You know, none of the characters have genders, none of the characters have names, and yet they were able to do something. We're right at the end of the first season, and I imagine, based on having never heard about it after it, had been airing for 2 weeks, I doubt we're going to get a second season. But for what it is, it's pretty wonderful. Typically, comic to cartoon series adaptations are pretty shit. I really wanted to like the Dilbert one back when Dilbert was a thing. And mostly because I really love Daniel Stern, who played the voice of Dilbert. But like that show got old after about 3 episodes. This is way better than that. So there you go. Separately, I started watching last night The Family. There's a lot of content out there called The Family, but the family that I am referring to is the C Street weird fraternity, sex culty, not really sex culty, sex cult oversells it. A group of, mostly Republican, almost now entirely Republican, politicians, Congress members and other people in government, or people who, or Christian nationalists who are trying to get influence over government, prayer breakfast and all that stuff. So it's an inside look at that organization based on the book The Family and they interview a lot with the author there. So there's like a lot of I really like documentaries that contain really hammy re-dramatizations of events, and so it's one of those. So it's got a lot of that going on. Check it out. First episode is all I've watched, and it was suitable background watching. So that's what you're in for. That's what it is. Other show, Slow Horses. Another Apple TV Plus show that's been recommended to me for a few years. It was like season 4. So if you want a show that you know is going to be around for a few years, it's like I think the 4th season maybe is now airing. It's you know, it's about spies and stuff, and it's in the UK, and I only watched the first couple episodes, but like I don't feel strongly enough about it to finish this sentence. So that's all I got there. Let's see what else we got. This is not a media recommendation, but I bought my first ever pool vacuum. So when you have an in-ground pool and it's outdoors, schmutz gets inside the pool, and a certain amount of that schmutz will just get kind of sucked up, right? Like you're running it through a pool pump. There's a filter. It'll get filtered out. But the heavy schmutz goes to the bottom of the floor, and no amount of jostling and brushing will kick it up enough for the filter to ever see it, right? Like it won't go up into the skimmer basket. It just lives there as perma-schmutz. And I've had this pool now. We've been here since February 21, and I've never vacuumed the floor of the pool before. We've had pool guys, and I'm sure at some point one of the pool guys brought out some kind of pool vacuum or plugged one in and let it run for a little bit. But I'm not 100% sure that's true, and it's very possibly completely not true. So we bought a Zodiac MX8 Elite on my brother's recommendation. You plug it into the vacuum port in the pool, and then you just have to adjust the flow rate of the pump. In our case, that means turning a little nozzle between how much suction is going to the skimmer basket in the top of the pool and how much suction is going to that port. And then you want to make sure that it's moving the little robot, even though there's no electronics in it, moving the little robot at the right speed. And Jeremy jokingly calls him his little scrubby. So a little scrubby will climb up walls, and it's very thorough. And the suction's good, and it brushes everything off, and so it's just been there for a day. And of course, it's removed 3 years of perma-schmutz. I extended the cable out so I could throw it in we have a little hot tub portion of the pool, threw it out over there too, and it cleaned that out. And a lot of people leave their pool vacuums just like in there all the time. But if I was able to get by with 3 years of zero pool vacuuming without really noticing the schmutz, I think what I'll probably do is just set a monthly reminder to go and let little Scrubby take a walk for a couple days and then pull him back in. But anyway, if you have a pool and you've never gotten a vacuum and you don't know what to do with your vacuum port, the Zodiac MX8 Elite could do worse. I'll try to remember to include a link to the Amazon listing. Any other? No, that's, I'm looking at my monitor. I'm like, do I want to recommend this monitor? I've never talked about this monitor before. And then I was like, nah, I don't.
You've got mail.
And so that means it's time to take a look at the mailbag. I either didn't get a lot of mail since version 21, or I did get a lot of mail, and my my automation that sends these into my things list, my to-do list for the podcast, did not get populated. And now that I think back, I can think of several emails that I did receive that are not here. So this is going to be a very short mailbag. I'll just pick a couple things that have been sitting here for a while. Jesse writes, what is the easiest or most common way to shoot yourself in the foot with rails? Of course, if you had a literal rail gun, you could shoot yourself in the foot with rails. I think you mean Ruby on Rails, the web framework. The easiest way to shoot yourself in the foot is probably to generate a bunch of code that you don't understand and ship it without tests. That's very easy to do. Rails makes it easy to scaffold stuff. Lots of gems make it easy to generate stuff. So don't do that. most common way, I think the most common way systemically that people shoot themselves in the foot generally, but especially with popular things like Rails, right? Like if you use React or you use Rails, there's a gajillion other people out there who've done it before. Generally, the pattern that I see folks run into very often is they will have a problem, then they will Google for the problem, and they will just find somebody's advice or find a tool, especially like a gem or a library that purports to solve the problem. And then without a lot of critical thinking, they will download that thing or follow that advice or copy paste that code. And if they can get the thing to work well enough, they'll ship that. And if you do that once, it's okay. It's probably not going to matter. But if that's your go-to dance move when you gotta cut a rug or do a thing, you're gonna have a real bad fucking time because your app is gonna just be this Ouija board of whatever the fuck Google fed you. And I see a lot of companies seem to do that. You know, I've seen a lot of apps that were extremely difficult to upgrade, either the Ruby version or the Rails version. Number one reason why that can be difficult is having a lot of dependencies that are tightly coupled to specific versions of either of those things, especially Rails. And so if you pull in a whole lot of gems and a lot of third-party code, like code you don't own, that is to say like third-party dependencies, and code you don't understand, that is to say code you copied and pasted, is by far the hardest thing to grapple with when you are trying to change that code. Whether it's to upgrade the underlying framework in the case of a Rails upgrade, or whether it's just trying to like make the app do something different than it used to, because now you have to like learn what the fucking app does because you never knew that, right? Or you institutionalize the practice of not really knowing and not having a consistent way of doing things. So that's like probably the most common way, but of course it's like, that's not news. Like that's just called like 90% of Rails apps out there. If you're looking for like one hot tip though, I'd encourage you to check out my my Rails World talk, because I do give some good tips for ways to not shoot yourself in the foot. That talk is a version of that talk is live. I'm not going to link to it today because I want to do my own Searles cut. And I'm still waiting from the organizers for a copy of my source video. So please be a little patient a little longer if you haven't watched the video of the talk. And I'll try to get to that soon. Hopefully before I go to Japan, hopefully they'll have that in my hands and I'll be able to turn that around. There's just a particular way I want to edit it so that you don't miss any slides when you see it. And that's all I'll say about that. I'm going to dig now. I'm digging. This long silence is me digging. Neil wrote in back in February. Hi, Neil. Neil wrote in with some of his off-the-cuff Vision Pro impressions. And he mentions a phenomenon that you might not be familiar with. When you're using the Vision Pro, you spatially put the windows in a particular place, and then you can walk around, the windows stay. And it does that with all of the AR who's-y what's-its. It anchors them to the physical world, GPS, images, depth mapping, combines all these different things to try to understand like what is a place. And then it sticks those windows there so you can move around. And like that way it doesn't rattle, right? Like as your head moves, like, you know, your head is moving relative to a fixed position window, just like right now as I'm moving my head, it's moving relative to a fixed position monitor that exists in space. That means that when you are walking and you want to continue to interact with a bit of content or read an article or just want to be in a different place, but with that same window, you have to pinchy pinch the bottom handle, the little grabby bar at the bottom of the window, and while pinching, walk around the house. So Neil wrote, this leads me to weirdly carrying a window around with me when I don't want to mess up my whole setup just to go grab a drink. I have caught myself doing this as well. In fact, recently I had my first ever. I was trying to move both my Mac Virtual Display window and also a YouTube window simultaneously from two rooms. So I had to pinch with both hands, and that actually worked. And so I pinched with both hands and walked to the balcony to relocate. That was quite foolish, and it feels like something that shouldn't be necessary. One workaround is, of course, you can move to another place and then press and hold the digital crown, and it'll recenter the display around you and kind of just stack all the windows right in front of you. Yeah, I don't know. That's what spatial computing is, right? Like, it's if I was designing a VR workstation, that's not how I would do it. But again, Apple is very intent on making this not a VR product, even though it is literally a virtual reality headset. Okay, well, I think that's enough pontification for one day. I will try to have real mailbag next time. Best way to do that is for you to email real mailbag at podcast@searls.co. I can't say it enough. If you don't write in, I'm going to cut the whole segment. And then where would we be? So we're coming in at a slight 2 hours today, nice and short after our record long podcast last week, last time. What is a week? All right. I don't know. I want to be done now. You probably want to be done now. So I'm just going to be done.